I'm Gary Carter, and in the next few weeks, we're going to learn what it takes to launch a startup from initial concept to launch. We have a team of mentors from Silicon Beach and a team launching their startup right now to help us learn about the process. We embrace and learn from our successes and failures. Welcome to Concept to Code. Today on Concept to Code, we're going to learn about lean startup strategies. Let's say you have a great business idea that will change the world, but you need to figure out how to make it profitable. To help us launch in this fast-paced tech world, I'm pleased to welcome our guest mentor, Robert Kiraz. With extensive experience designing and concepting real-world technology solutions, Robert co-founded Vocal. It's a funded video talk show platform that was acquired in 2013. He currently heads Leanometry, a development agency based out of Santa Monica that employs practical lean startup methods to take ideas to market in less than 30 days. Robert, please join us.
Hi.
Thanks for coming, Robert.
Happy
Take
to
it
be
away.
here. All right, thank you. Thank you for having me. Today we're going to talk about innovation. Innovation is at its core simply solving a problem in new and creative ways. Now, we're a nation of problem solvers. And as long as we stay focused on solving problems, we'll stay at the forefront of technology. Now here's the thing. Creating a game-changing company really is not as difficult as it may seem. The truth is that pretty much anybody can do it. Because at its core, you don't need to be a genius inventor or have an in-depth understanding of business models or business plans. But what you do need is a lot of heart. Because at its core, it's about being compassionate to the customer, thinking about the customer, solving problems, and staying focused on keeping them happy. Now, it might seem pretty obvious, but at its core, it's really not practiced very often. Many entrepreneurs, rather than being problem solvers, end up kind of getting infatuated with technology. You know, how to build this cool new gadget, this new technology, this new app, widget, whatever it might be. So, what we want to do is get back to the basics of what entrepreneurship is about. The bedrock of entrepreneurship is finding problems that are worth solving. That's what we're going to talk about today. So by the end of this talk, hopefully you'll have a way to be able to understand whether a product is worth pursuing or not using really basic tools. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the Lean Startup. This is a book popularized by Eric Ries. And a lot of the methodologies of the Lean Startup have kind of taken a life of their own. But at its core, the book really wants to answer a question, a fundamental question, which is, why do 90% of startups fail? And why is it that that happens? And what about the other 10%? Why were they able to fall so short when the odds are so against them? And why is this? So, moving on to the next slide. What Ries found is that basically, it's not that these companies that were successful were able to be successful because they had a brilliant idea or a brilliant execution on that idea. It's really that their solutions were kind of off like everybody else, but they were able to learn and adapt quicker than expected. This is usually how most startups approach their objective of success. They assume it's going to be a pretty linear path to success. The reality is that most startups have the wrong assumptions off the bat, and that's why 90% of startups fail. Yet, that 10% that succeed are able to collect user feedback and change and do course correction. And that's how they're able to succeed. So at its core, in the next slide, we'll see that at its core, the solutions and the answers are not going to be found in boardrooms and conference rooms. Really, the answer is not going to be here. It's going to be out there where your customers are. So sooner that you can reach out to your customers and engage them, sooner you're going to be able to discover exactly what that solution is. But you have to be really problem-focused to find it. So how do you do it? Well, in the next slide, we're going to talk about 4 really easy steps that are going to help you find out exactly what that problem is and if it's a problem that's worth solving. Okay, so first up. The very first thing you want to do is state the problem. A real simple, clear statement of what it is that you're trying to solve. After that, you want to list out your customers. And here you want to list them out in as much detail as possible. And we're going to go through this shortly. After you have your list of segments, you want to rank them according to something called the SPA treatment, which we'll go over. Lastly, you're going to interview them. As soon as you interview your customers, you're going to be able to determine if this is really a problem that's worth pursuing or not. So diving in even deeper, let's talk about the first step. Stating the problem. The problem that you're looking at here is actually from my first company, where we were building a video talk show platform. And the concept is pretty much just that. Our problem was it's hard for influencers to easily host a moderated live video chat with fans. Okay, if you look at it, influencers are the customers. It's high level, which is fine. That's where you want to keep it during your problem statement. And hosting moderated live video chat with fans. Well, we assumed that the problem was linked to most fan chats not being moderated. So that's why we put it up there. So it's a real straightforward problem. If you move on to the next step, after you have your problem statement, what you want to do is list out all of your customers. Now, previously I'd mentioned influencers, right? Well, for us, influencers too broad. In fact, in many cases, it's too broad. So what you want to do is break it down. So what we did was we broke down influencers into mainstream celebrities or established YouTube personalities or bored teenagers on Twitter or Instagram or what have you. So what you want to do here when you list out your customers is you want to break them down into as much detail as possible, as many as possible, and use as many adjectives as possible. So in the case of mainstream celebrities or established YouTubers, those are very specific. They're not up-and-coming YouTubers, they're established YouTubers. They're not just celebrities, they're mainstream celebrities. So you want to be as specific as possible when you segment them out. That's step 2. On step 3, what we have here is, if we can go back a slide, you'll see, what you want to do is rank them by something called the SPA treatment. Why do you want to do this? Well, because you have a long list of segments. Well, how do you know who's going to be your early adopter? Remember, an early adopter is the first user or the first group of users that are going to use your service. And so you want to stay focused on who they are, because you're not going to get the whole world to use your service. You're probably going to get just one segment or 2 segments to get started. So you want to be able to prioritize them. So in this case, we have a list of my previous company's customer segments broken down: mainstream celebrities, established YouTubers. So the way this works for prioritization is simply, well, I can tell you, is the SPA treatment, which is a technique developed by customerdevlabs.com, which is a way of ranking these segments. And you can rank them by SPA: size, pay or pain, and access. So in the case of mainstream celebrities, taking the example of my previous company, we were thinking, well, let's get mainstream celebrities to use our service. Well, how big of a segment is that? Well, there aren't that many, so let's rank these 1 to 3. 1 would be pretty small. They're in the hundreds. We'll rank it at 2 if there's thousands of them. We'll rank it at 3 if there's 10,000. Well, mainstream celebrities, there aren't that many, so we rank them a 1. In the case of pay or pain, how much is it a pain for celebrities to, engage with their fans online? Well, we figured, okay, it's kind of an issue, but of course they're mainstream celebrities. They have Jay Leno, or Jimmy Fallon now. They have all these different avenues to engage. So engaging with fans online, it might not be the biggest priority, but it is a priority. So we gave them a 2. Lastly, access. What access means is how much effort is it going to take to acquire this customer? So for example, if it's going to take 1 day to acquire a customer, or let's say a couple days, we might want to give it a pretty high ranking, or versus let's say weeks. So the way we rank this is, well, if it takes you a couple weeks to acquire a customer, give them a 1. If it takes you a couple days, give them a 2. If you can acquire that customer in the same day, within a few hours, give them a 3. So in this case, mainstream celebrities, we're like, well, I don't know anyone at a talent agency, and so it would take forever probably to get someone like Tom Cruise on our service. So we gave them a 1. And so once you have your numbers, what you want to do is multiply them across. So 1 times 2 times 1 to give you a total of 2. And that's the ranking on mainstream celebrities. Now, moving a little bit faster, if you look at the next slide, we're going to do the same thing for established YouTubers. So looking at the size of established YouTubers, well, there's definitely more of them than mainstream celebrities like Tom Cruise or Julia Roberts. They're actually in the thousands, so we'll give them a 2. What about pay and pain? Well, it's a really big priority for YouTubers to expand their audience online. Their audience was built online. So for them to stay relevant, they have to keep engaging online. So we're going to give them a 3. Lastly, access. A lot of these YouTubers, they live on Twitter, they live on Facebook, so reaching out to them is really as easy as sending a tweet or a message. But, you know, they're pretty busy, so it may not really be that quick. It might take more like a few days to get a response. So it's not a 3, it's not a 1, it's a 2. So if you multiply across, you'd get 12. Now this starts getting interesting at this point. So you can start comparing the opportunity of getting a mainstream celebrity versus an established YouTuber. There's a pretty big difference there. What happens when you do them all? And in the next slide, you'll see all the different segments. And at a glance, you'll be able to see, wow, there's a couple here that are really popping out. Like, for example, established YouTubers or bored teenagers, which really are not mutually exclusive. So it's kind of funny that they came out that way. But 12 and 9, they scored pretty high. So this tells you pretty much that this is a segment or 2 segments that are really worth pursuing. They may be your very first early adopters. Now, you don't know for sure until you reach out to them. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about ultimately the last step of customer validation, interviewing them. That's the only way you know for sure if this problem is really worth solving. So, a couple quick ground rules for interviewing. First thing is you want to keep it in person. Why? Because that way you can talk to the person, follow up in person. You can gauge their reactions, sense hesitation in their voices, and see if there's any subtext there. So you can follow up. Ideally, you do it in person. If you can't do it in person, Skype is a great option. If you can't Skype, then you can do it via telephone. The next key point, no solutions. No need to talk about features. Remember, your solution doesn't exist, so there's no point to talk about it. The goal here is not selling a solution, it's about learning about the problem. The next point, ask why. Ask it constantly. Why? Why is this? Is this a problem? Why do you say that? Have you ever had any troubles with this? Do you pay for any services that currently offer something like this? So what you want to do is kind of data mine and talk to your customers and identify if, you know, how are they going about solving this dilemma now? Because if you can solve it better than what they're doing, they might throw a lot of money at you to make it happen. Final point, or one of the second to final, take notes. It's so important to be able to document this as you're talking to them so you don't forget about it. And if you can't do it yourself, get a friend to go out with you. Take notes while you interview your subject. Lastly, after the interview's over, just look at the patterns. You'll see pretty quickly if the problems that you thought were big problems were really not that big, or maybe they were a minor nuisance, but you know, certainly not something that they would go crazy over. That's the point here, is to make sure you kind of discover early on if this is really worth pursuing or not. So in the next slide is just a real quick recap, which is what you want to do is define, just as we did, define what the problem is, define the segment, your customer segment, put them through the SPA treatment, and then you go out and interview, and then afterwards you discover whether it's a valid or invalid problem. If it's valid, congratulations, you can move on towards solving it. If it's invalid, congratulations, you just saved yourself months of agony working on a product that may not have taken off. So you just go through this cycle over and over again, taking what you've learned to a new height. So that concludes it. If you'd like to have any more, and if you have any other questions, you can always reach me at Twitter at Robert Kiraz, or email me hello@leanometry.com. Thank you.
Robert, thank you for that informative, comprehensive presentation on Lean Startup Methods.
Thank you very much.
I'll throw away my business plan. When we come back, we're going to meet our startup team favorite and listen into their discussion with Robert on Lean Startup strategies.
Riding a bicycle can seem like child's play.
But only if you're playing indoors. Cars and bikes need to play together.
Play it safe. Ride by the rules.
Hey, share the road!
Welcome back to Concept to Code, a show focused on giving you the skills to launch your startup. I'm your host, Gary Carter, and today we're learning about Lean Startup strategies. Our featured startup today is a company called Favorite, and the team will give us an insider's view of their company launch. We're pleased to have co-founders Anke Aldenart and Andres Rodriguez of Favorite. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, my name is Anke Oudenaert. I'm one of the co-founders of Favorite. Favorite is a platform that aims to help users bookmark their physical world. Our first product that we're developing is a mobile app that'll help users to save and share their favorite places and discover new ones. Before Favorite, we co-founded a company called JumpTime. JumpTime focused on developing traffic optimization software. We sold that company to OpenX, a big ad tech company here in Pasadena. We then stayed on board for a little bit, helped them integrate the software. Before JumpTime, I was part of Yahoo. I was there for about 8 years. I headed up their market research. And that's where I learned a lot about kind of digital marketing and growing an audience in the digital world. I also teach digital marketing at UCLA Anderson.
Thank you, Anke. So on my side, I came to the US to go to grad school at Stanford. After grad school, I did research in artificial intelligence for about 10 years. And after that, we co-founded with Anke JumpTime. And in Favorite, what we want to do is to be able to give people recommendations based on what their friends like. To me, it's astonishing that in this day and age, we cannot get good recommendations from your friends based on most of the applications and frameworks that are there in social media. I think that we can do a much better job at that. And we're building a very smart recommendations engine. And before that, we're actually starting to build a platform that will allow us to have the data so that that recommendations engine can run on top of it. So that's what Favorite is about.
Oh, awesome. Well, I have to ask, what inspired the idea?
Actually, it's interesting. It was largely a problem that we experienced ourselves. So we felt that there wasn't really a tool out there that made it very easy for users to just save their favorite places so that they can recall them later. We actually had this anecdote where we really literally couldn't find the place anymore that we loved or once loved. But on top of that, we also felt that once people have those places saved, it's not easy to share that with other people. So that was the core thing we wanted to solve, and then get to like, hey, once we start sharing, then we should be able to start recommending as well. And that's basically why the kind of save, share, recommend mission kind of came about for Favorite.
Okay, I see. I'm curious, did you ever have a chance to validate that assumption that was a core problem that people were having?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a very important question, because one may have that problem themselves. It doesn't mean there's a large audience there that experiences the same. Right. So we did actually go out and we interviewed other people that we felt might have this problem. And we tried to initially kind of cast a relatively wide net, although our net was very much people that we knew. So we would go and kind of see whether this was actually a valid problem. It turned out people had all these kind of shortcuts to this problem, like solving this problem. Somehow they'd managed like little things, but yes, they had a pain point. So once we figured that out, then we tried to figure out like, hey, who's kind of the main group of people that seems to experience that pain point over and over. And that's how we kind of landed on the segment that we then decided was going to be our target audience for the tool.
I see. Well, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, if you tell your friends or family you're working on a project, they're always going to say, yeah, that's fantastic. I would totally sign up for it. Yeah. But they're totally biased, no? Yeah. So it seems like after you went through the friends and family, did you actually have a chance to speak to potential users, and how many did you speak to about the problem?
It's an interesting question, how many. We did indeed kind of then go broader with like, let's also talk to so-and-so, or kind of just people that we met and just talked about kind of what we were doing, what we were trying to solve for. Not a very formal process, I would say. We did go to some graduate students, kind of that was a group that we really wanted to get a good sense of, were they a potential candidate for this. We did go to other people that were kind of mothers that we felt were a potential good target group for us. We didn't go about it very formally, though. And I saw one of the things that you recommended was, hey, write down, keep notes. our notes aren't there. We interviewed many people, but we
It's
don't
all
have
right.
that part.
Neither did
Yes.
I. I mean, when I did my previous company. No, it's actually very normal not to do that, because as entrepreneurs we're so passionate and excited about getting out there and solving something, you know. And it seems like, are there any competitors in the space that you're entering? That might be an indicator of where the customers might be.
Yeah, very much so. And
Okay.
I think that we've actually picked a space that I think that it's going to be difficult to actually go against some of the competitors, because what we're doing is more or less in the space of very big companies like Yelp, big companies like Foursquare, Pinterest. So I think that what we're doing, it's essentially different. I think we're providing something that none of those services out there are really providing exactly as we're doing it, or with the same level of efficiency. But I think definitely the market has been somewhat validated by the existence of these other companies. We have a couple of hypotheses that we're definitely trying to prove with our first beta, but I think that we're navigating waters where some of the things are very well established, and some of the other finer, more nuanced concepts that we want to get across are not as well validated.
And that was actually one of the things that we felt when we talked to users. What we wanted to make sure is that the pain point is there even while the other competitors exist. So we actually went to talk specifically, and those were the people we didn't know as well, not friends and family necessarily. We went to talk to, say, some of the premium users of Yelp, or some of the kind of really heavy users of these other tools, Foursquare, Yelp, and figured out kind of what their pain points were. Kind of, was there still a need that seemed to be left out there that still required another product? Kind of really figure out, like, is there an opening in the market for us to enter? Now, that was definitely on the consumer side. We found that, yes, there is still a big pain point. On the merchant side, which is the other part of the picture here, because our revenue model will be an advertising-based model, so we want merchants to be able to put native advertising inside our tool over time. Now, what we saw there is that's really where there is still a very big pain point. People feel that there is an option to have another solution there. So we felt that there was definitely an opportunity to have more than one player in this space, or more than two players in this space. So we felt that there was an opportunity to get some of that share of the market.
I see. Okay, got it. Well, in speaking to them, what were maybe the number 1, 2, or 3 pain points that they had being on Yelp? I mean, they're very passionate about Yelp, most likely, right? So what is it that where Yelp or services like Yelp fall short and that you could deliver?
Actually, there's a few things. On the consumer side, the very easy action of a non-involved behavior on the consumer side, I'm just going to add something to my favorites. I've bookmarked it as a result. Very easy, no need to write a review, none of that. Then an easy way to share that review with your friends, or that fact that you favored something. But then the third thing, and that's probably one of the main points, is as Yelp grows, what you get is when you go into getting a recommendation out of the engine, you're going to get an average recommendation based on what the average population likes about a particular place. Whereas for some people, that just doesn't do it. You really want to have, what would my friends kind of like, people like myself, what is it that they go to when they're on Times Square in New York, for instance, rather than the large group of people that's ever been on Times Square in New York. So that's kind of one of the pain points we saw. Then on the other side, from the merchant's point of view, it's that kind of getting a controlled platform that's positive, where they know that they'll just have their native ad appear in an environment that they know is really just positive, just about things people like. And that was another aspect we saw was important there.
Now, I have a question. How much of a time commitment is involved to launch a startup in under 60 days? Or under 30 days, sorry.
Right.
Can you have a full-time job and carry a full-time job? Because I know some of our audience members may have a good idea, but we want to give them a sense of what type of time commitment. And all of you can kind of chime in.
Sure, sure. If you want to do it in 30 days, there's no way you're going to balance a job. But it doesn't need to happen in 30 days. We at Leanometry have this approach where, if you can't get it off the ground full time within 1 month, it might be too complex for version 1 product. So we like to simplify products as much as possible, get it out the door as quickly as possible, because the sooner you launch it, well, that's where most of your learning happens, right? So the sooner you launch it, that's when you'll realize, from customer usage or lack thereof, what you're supposed to do to pivot if necessary. But if so often startup entrepreneurs can spend 6 months in stealth mode building something that they find out 6 months down the road may not have been a very good decision. So the sooner you can get something out the door, the better, but it is definitely a full-time commitment.
I think I've been actually on both sides of that equation. I've done companies where I had a full-time job, and I've done companies where I went full on the company. And I think that it's very hard to do it when you're not. You can prep and you can prepare yourself for when you are actually going full-time, but there is, I think, an essence of commitment and of passion of going full on with the company. So I think it's very hard to do it while you have a job on the side.
Okay.
Yeah, agree.
So to be successful, you have to go all in.
I
think so too.
Okay. Well, folks, that's enough lean startup strategies for today. Now it's time to do the real work. Thank you, Robert, Kiraz, and Favorite for the learning experience. And thank you for joining us today. We'll see you back next time for more Concept to Code.